And welcome back. Okay, spokes are all done, so we're going to work on this strut now. Now, don't forget, I have this base brown color mixed up from the beginning of the painting, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of that out onto the palette and use that as a start for all this. So the first thing I'm going to do with this 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 strut is really corroded. It's got a lot of oxidation on it, so I'm going to start with that. And to get that done, I'm going to start with the lightest part first, which is it's like a really light tan. So I'm going to use that same brown color that I just showed you, which is the base brown color, and add some white to it. So it seems to be, the pitting seems to happen mostly in the beginning here, the bottom part of it. Let me get you a little closer. There we go. That's better. Excuse me. All right, so I'm just going to add the pitting on this first. And there's a lot that's going to happen to this. So this is really just the first layer. So it might not look right yet, but it'll get there. The last thing I'll do, there's looks like a bolt and a screw right here at the end. Those will go on last once I get all the texturing done. And it doesn't seem to happen as much up here, so I'll just kind of fade it away, mostly down here, all that pitting. And that may just be the lighting too, the light just may be hitting this bottom section a lot better than the upper section. So I reduced it a little bit, so now I went in, so I hit it really like kind of blobby in the beginning. So now I'm going to do the same thing with this reduced a little bit better, which will, not better, but a little bit more. So it'll allow me to get these really finer dots in here too. So that way you don't just get the same, the same brush stroke. You get different variations in that, and that'll make it look more natural. There we go. A little bit up here, not too much. Smaller ones would work. Okay. Now we go back in with if I use a standard brown, it'll probably I'm going to take that same brown, which is the brown that I used to spray that strut in originally, but I'm going to add a little bit of what is that? Raw umber. So this will give it a little bit more of an orange kick to it. I may have to get it a little bit darker. No, yeah, I'm going to do a little bit darker, but that's heading in the right direction. So what I can do with this, since this is really close to that original color, if there was a blob, lighter blob that didn't really come out the way I wanted to, I can reshape it with this color since it's really close to the background. It's reasonably transparent too, so I can't really, clean up some of these edges, but it's pretty transparent, so it's not going to cover too well. There we go. Good. All right, next, and so basically just make the same color but just a little bit darker, and just keep going until you get like a really good rusty orangey color. So this is much darker, so we're going to start in with the darker details now, and it's roughly the same kind of thing. I'm just building up these layers of texture to give it this really rusted, pitted look. Try again, same thing, trying to vary my brush strokes here so it's not just dabbing it on there, because it'll produce a similar shape from the brush. And I don't want that. I don't want like a repetitive pattern. I want it to be really random. So I push the brush down, then like pull it, or push the brush down and push it in different directions, and that'll stretch out the bristles and make them go in different ways, and that's what'll kind of give it that variation. If I just tap it at the same time, I'm going to get a triangular pattern in the brush strokes. Yeah, it gets really dark up here, which is good. So what I'm going to end up doing at the top of this is introducing a little more of that same shading color that I used on the spokes. It will also help to tie the whole thing together too. By using the same shading color throughout the painting, that, will really tie it together nicely. It seems like it looks like I missed the background on that a little bit. So there's a bit of the background there that I did not get. But that's okay. I'll straighten it out. And with this, as I get darker and add more and more layers, I want to make sure that I leave some of the lightest one first. It's easy to just go over the whole thing and just kind of blow out all the stuff you did in the first couple passes. But, so you got to be conscious of that too. There we go. Yeah, I'm going to fix that background a bit. See how well, I use a paintbrush to point. So there's a little gap right here for some reason. I just didn't, get things out as far as or over as far as they needed to go. So I'm going to fix that now. So I have a really that dark brown. Use that to finish this guy here. And also on this side, just kind of clean up that line a little bit. Now I'm going to do the same with the background. And just like the repair, when I was cleaning up around the spokes, I'm going to do the same thing again. Mix up a little bit of a light gray. And that's what I'm going to use to correct this. It needs to be a little bit darker here. Yeah, there you go. So now I can kind of fill the gap there. And then with this, again, I kind of dabble it a little bit, and that'll help blend it in so it doesn't just look like a, like that. Like I screwed that up. That's too dark. But it looks like a paintbrush stroke. I don't want that. I'm trying to mimic what the airbrush did in the background. Now, granted, I mean, it's such a small area. Even if it doesn't look perfect, it's still going to look right. Like I don't have to break out the airbrush to smooth it out or anything. If it was a larger repair on the backdrop, I would, like I had to do here, down here. I had to airbrush that, I think. Did I? Well, as an example, that would be a place I would need to, to do a little bit more airbrushing to blend it out. But up here, it's not so much. If I just kind of scumble that a little bit, it blends in really, really well. All right, so that is good. Since I'm noticing things as I'm kind of rolling through this, I'll drop them in. And again, I try to do this when I see them, because if I just kind of make a list, I know in my head, I know I'll forget them. So this right here, there's a great highlight where the spoke kind of turns into the hub. So I missed that originally, but I saw it while I was working on the other part, so I'll get that now. Yeah, let's put the bolts in. So there are two here. It looks like a bolt and above and a screw below. So we'll start with the white on the bolt. And then the screw itself is just below it. So we'll start with white, because that'll kind of hook them in. And then I can work on the shading and oxidizing them. So I'm going to shade them first, because that paint is pretty, it's pretty thick and it's pretty wet right there. So I got to let it dry before I go on to the next step on that. So I'll put the shading in, because the shading doesn't really touch any of that. And yes, the pressure release valve for my compressor seems to be unusually loud lately. So this is my older hammerhead compressor from Medea, and I've fixed it once, and it was kind of sort of the same problem. So I don't know what's going on with it, but it seems to be functioning. It just, you heard it. It just blasts out the excess pressure at the end. All right, so there's the shading on those two. And by now, the white that I put on there is pretty dry. So now I can add the oxidation to it. I think, again, that whatever this is, aluminum or stainless or something, but it's got a tiny bit of discoloration to it. And again, it's yellowish. So I got that yellow ochre. Just kind of dab it on above the shadow line, and that locks those in. So the only thing left for this little strut right here, this brace, is to hit it with the airbrush. Now I think, oops, sorry, yeah, there is. All right, there's a darker edge on this side of it. So I'm gonna knock that out now. And I'm gonna use a ruler for that because I want this fairly straight. So I want it straight, but I did so much work to get it all, crumbly. I don't want the line to be perfectly smooth, but I do want it straight. So I'll show you what I mean. So same trick, I just kind of angle the ruler up a little bit so that I can run the ferrule along it. But instead of just dragging this all the way across, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of tap it down the side of this. So it's straight, but it's got gaps in it, and that will, kind of keep that feel of the corrosion, but still I don't have this like crooked line left. I'm going to clean up the other side too, even though there's a highlight, it's lighter on this side of the other one, but if I clean up a couple of these, it'll just help that strut pop out. So anywhere where there's dark, I can kind of clean that up a little bit like that. All right, now for the airbrushing portion of this. But even now, it's cool, like that little shadow from the strut right there that I put in the last episode. Now that makes total sense. It feels like this is floating above that drum, and it's neat how when you're just kind of focused on the tiny specifics, making sure they're right. It's fun when you take a step back and you did something before that now makes total sense. It's really one of the joys about doing these paintings, these longer paintings. Things like that happen a lot. Like, oh, look at that shadow from whatever. So grab this. Okay. Oh, that's cool. I just had a thought. So the big camera that you're looking through right now to get this, this image here, replaced another camera. So I have another camera that I wasn't really doing anything with. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to hook that camera up directly over the palette, so that when I do all the palette work, I can quickly switch cameras to the palette so you guys can see me doing the paletting too. Or I'll leave it, on in the corner or something like that. But I'll work on setting that up for the next time. All right, what do we got? So, okay, right, airbrushing. Okay, so it wasn't that long ago. It was only a week when I showed you the, the masking, kind of quick masking thing for the spokes, for shading those. I'm going to use the same technique here. But with this is a little bit longer. So I'm going to pull out some of the bigger shields with longer straight edge. I could just use a piece of paper too. That would work. But I've got all these great shields. These are both the Andrea, zip out so you can see it. Here we go. These are both the Andrea Mistretta shields. These are probably one of my favorite shields, and I have a real tiny one here too. It's on the other side, but this is the FH6, and then the FH5 is just a smaller version of this, and they even have a real tiny one too. So I love all the curves, and these also have straight edges on them, which is nice. So that's what I'm going to use for. All right. So same thing, line up this one on the bottom, drop a magnet on it. Oh, no I'm not. It's right on the edge. All right, you know what I'll do? So the magnet is, too big for it wants to pull down to the bench. So I'll use this big magnet on this side like this. Now for lining this up, so I line it up just on the outside. Like, I don't line it exactly on that shape. I just a hair outside of it. And what that'll do is that'll clean it up. If I line it right on it, it won't, it'll still leave that same shattered edge that's on it. So this smaller one here, what I'll do is I'll use one of the neodymium magnets. These are really strong as well, but they're smaller, footprint wise. So they're not hanging over the edge and then want to grab onto the bench. that's that. Now I want to take a quick look at my reference real quick so I know what I'm doing here. There's not much on, oh, sorry. There's not much on this at all. So I'm just going to really lightly start at the top and just add a little bit to it. I thought there was a lot, but there isn't. Same thing, this is that lumber color, the burnt umber in black. There we go. So really, really light, you know, just kind of letting it go and then stopping and taking a look at it until it's where it needs to be. And it is where it needs to be. There we go. There it is. Okay, so that's the strut. So now, excitingly, other than minor adjustments, that whole front wheel is done now. And that's a big thing, you know, that's what, an eighth? No. Maybe 1/10 of the painting, maybe 1/8 of the whole painting. But to get that done is monumental because, again, it sets up the rest of the painting. Now I have a really good feel for how to tackle the rest of the rust. So really from here it's academic. It's just filling in those other areas, which is great. I think, as I mentioned last week, you know, I could move on to like the tank and the other rusty parts, but I think I'm just going to work on the fork. I think if I get the whole front end of this bike done, you know, that's going to make me really happy. That being said, what I really should do then, before I do the fork, is to finish the sidecar. Yeah, that's going to be prudent. If I do the fork and then have to do the sidecar, that's not going to work very well. So yeah, so let's tackle that. The sidecar is actually pretty easy. It's almost black down in here on the lower side of it, and then the upper side of it has mostly this color here, and it's got some oxidation in it too. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. All right, so, oh, I have it in the brush. So fortunately, I have that burnt umber color still in the brush from the shading, so I can use that for the sidecar. What I should do is take a second and cut out the sidecar, but I think I'm going to freehand it for a little bit first, just to kind of keep its softness for now. Grab one of these, same template. So this has, like I said, has nice straight edges, but it also has every possible curve you could possibly want. It's just, like I said, this is one of my go-to templates. That original 7 from Art Tool, if you're looking for just the standard, you know, just a good set of stencils to kind of get you started, that Essential 7 set is really what that is. It is essential. It has a lot of great shapes in it. It's a great place to start. They're very well made. I mean, I still have my original. I mean, I've lost a couple of them over the years, but I still have templates from that original set that I got way, way back, early 90s. They're just great. They're great. And like I said, they find their way into so much of this too. I could try to hold the straight edge here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually jump back to a smaller template because of the shape of that. What did I do with Scott's template? I have a template holder, and of course, you know, I don't put the templates back in it, which defeats the purpose of having a template holder in the first place. Well, anyway. All right. Let me take a look at this real quick. It is, yeah, it's just uniformly pitted. So what I'm going to do here, I've got the burnt umber in here. Let's get this rolling again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build this color up, but I'm going to build it up or darken it with the texture at the same time. So I could just hit the whole thing and darken it and then just throw some texture on it. But again, the difference there is with the layers and layers of texture, you're going to pick that up in the final painting. Where if there's just one layer or 2 layers, say there are 2 layers, so I darken it and then add a little bit of texture to it, it has a different look than if I build it up slower with more layers. And that's something that you really can't see it in a reproduction, like a print, but you can certainly see it in the real one. And I get it a lot, and I love it when people say, I don't, I look at the paintings in real life and they look almost three-dimensional, and that's why. You're seeing the light going through this paint and then bouncing back up. And I'm always drawn to that, like that style of painting, like when you have an oil painting with just, a lot of glazes, or watercolors, or things like that, where I can really see the transparency through them. I really like that a lot. I just added a little bit of reducer to this, just to kind of loosen it up a little bit, so I can, because again, I'm not going for opacity here, I'm going for the texture. I'm not going to go all the way up to that top line because I have to do this brown up here. So I'm just going to come close to it, so that way after I put the brown in, I can finish that edge with the darker color. If I go all the way up to that line and then put the brown down on top of it, it's going to shift in color. So it's always nicer to kind of put a darker color on top of a lighter color. There's less work you have to do. Alright, so I'm going to keep this fairly open, this grain pattern, because I'm going to tighten it up as I introduce new layers to it. And again, ultimately this is going to be almost dark, almost black. You're really not going to be able to pick up a lot of this texture, but it'll be there. And again, that's what really adds it. Again, I'm not overly worried about getting a overspray on this other fork, because I got to paint the whole thing anyway, and it's going to be on top of this. So the background, however, below, I don't want to get any overspray down on the background. That I would have to fix. Alright, so I brought that whole thing down a shade. I'm going to continue on with the other little bits. I'm not going to worry under here. This is also sidecar, way over here. But it's so close to the rest of the motor and everything. I'll deal with that when I do the motor. This is also why I didn't do like a cutout stencil for this, because I'm working so close by developing this texture that I can just kind of paint around the springs here and the forks. I'm not trying to just. If I was just trying to uniformly make this one color, I would definitely cut out one of the photocopies for this, make a stencil for it, then I could just spray over it very evenly and get a nice smooth finish on it. But of course this is not smooth at all. It's it's all rusted and everything. So now half of this should be, where am I at? There am I. Yeah, so half of this is not really, just the sidecar appears here, like in this small strip right here, all the way up. I have this all kind of brown here. That's really just shading on that fork, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do the texture on that. Obviously it'll be good. That looks really good. Alright, before I go too far, I'm going to do the top section here. So that is that same brown. Actually, it's a little bit lighter. You know what it's like? It's kind of a combination of, so you know how the top of this is nice steel blue? It's a combination of this and this side part where it's brown. So, yeah, so we're going to do brown first. We're going to add the blue steelish color after. So brown first. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to block off the, I'm going to block off the background here, like so. Put a magnet on that. I don't have to worry about blocking off this bottom section because I want that to blend. So I am waiting on parts for my Micron because I dropped it. And I gave you a moment to have that gasp as I did when I dropped it, because the Micron like the one I was just using, that Iwata it's an expensive brush, and it's expensive to maintain as well. You know, it's like I always say, it's like owning a sports car. Everything's expensive on it, so it performs, but you pay for that performance. So when you drop it, it hurts extra special. So I did it. I knocked it off the airbrush holder. It was in an airbrush holder, and I tilted it. I hit it with my hand and popped out and went all the way down to the floor and damaged the nozzle and needle. So fortunately, it didn't damage the nozzle cap. If I had to replace the whole head system of that, it's essentially like buying another airbrush. It's about $150. That would make me a sad panda. All right, so there's the same brown color that I've been using for the whole painting. I really should mark this, but it's the only brown like it, so that's why I didn't mark it, because I knew I wouldn't need to. I'm going to add a little bit of reducer to it. So this is, again, it's 4050, which is the gloss, UVLS gloss clear, and 4011 reducer, and it's mixed 1:5. So it's 1 part 4050, 1 part gloss clear, and 5 parts reducer. And this will just kind of lighten up that, make it a little bit more usable, a little bit more controllable. Again, right out of the bottle, the browns are really, stiff. They're difficult to spray through a smaller brush. So this just helps loosen that up, gives me a little bit of control over it. And again, if you watch the Tech Tuesday on the basics, the getting started, I talk a lot about the reduction and reducing for the brush itself, in the paint, not doing a standard type of just generic reduction. Okay, and that's why. So, all right, same deal here. I want to kind of build this up pretty evenly, but I also don't want it super smooth, because it is smooth because of the weathering, but it's not, showroom smooth. So I'm going to kind of just lightly put it in, but if blobs happen, that's totally fine. I want to say there's white in here. I'm pretty sure there is. So that would certainly do that shifting to blue if I'm covering it. Now, fortunately, that blue shift is something that happens in this painting, that steel color. So that's actually a good thing. And I'm going to take advantage of that blue shift in a second on this top side. Let me move this a little closer so we don't get so much air blasting. I'm going to change the light so I can see around it. The shadow is cast by the magnet. Looking at keep looking at the reference. That is, okay, it's a ribbon. Neat. That little gap right there looks like this gentleman won a ribbon for this bike. So I'm not going to put the ribbon on. So now that I know that, I can paint over it. I mean, congratulations to him or her, but so you can see how I'm kind of getting this brown, but I'm still leaving that texture in there. I mean, it's not as, textured as this down here, but it's got some life to it. Once I get the texture in, now that I'm pretty happy with, the kind of that, the feel of that, now I can kind of go over the whole thing and bring it to that, the brown color that it needs to be. So now I can smooth it out a little bit. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, good. Let's do this. All right, excellent. So I think we'll break there because I think we are at 30 minutes, which is surprising. That went really fast. I love it. I said it before too. It's when I went 40 minutes on the other one. It's so much fun with, when I just totally lose track of time. I can't believe that's 30 minutes already. All right, so there we go. So we got the strut done, the whole wheel is pretty much locked in, and now we got the a good start on the sidecar. So that's what I'll finish on the next episode. All right, so great. You guys know the drill. So if you are enjoying this, please like and subscribe and click that bell icon, and share this with someone. If you feel you know someone who would enjoy it as well. That would be fantastic. So, all right. So for Steve Leahy in Open Studio, we are tracking along. We're getting there. So great. I will catch all of you next week, and I look forward to reading your comments here, and I will catch you guys all on the next one.